Hello, my name is Amanda Caudle, and today we are going to be talking about some integration of literacy strategies that we can use in the library or even in our own classrooms. So today you will need to access this Google form. So if you will click on the link on the screen, or I will attach it below in the YouTube video that you can click on. We will be interacting with this video on and off throughout our presentation today. We have two goals today. I have two goals for you all to accomplish, and one of them is to learn strategies to integrate literacy-based reading activities into the library, and number two is to explain how to use each one of these strategies. Today we're going to be focusing on three main strategies that I'm very fond of, that I think are very successful when they are used in the library. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what is a literacy-based reading. Literacy-based reading can be a variety of things. Activities like talking, singing, reading, storytelling, drawing, and writing can all help to develop your child's literacy. And this came from Children.net. That was the best overall definition that I could find on this. And so I want you to take a second before we get started and to brainstorm some different literacy-based activities you may use in your classroom that you're not even aware of. So you can go to your Google form. The first question is going to ask you your name, so I can know and see who has completed this. And the second question will be the brainstorming. So I'm going to give you can pause this video and give it about 2 or 3 minutes to brainstorm. So let me go back to what literacy-based reading activities are. They can be talking, singing, reading, storytelling, drawing, or writing. And so when you are ready to move on, you can press play from now on. Okay, so I'm curious to see what brainstorming activities that you've thought of for your that you may use in your own classroom. And so we're going to be talking about three, like I mentioned earlier, that I really found interesting, that I think are very successful when used in the library or in the classroom. And so these three are: one is the literature circles, number two is book talks, and number three is audiobooks and or oral reading. And so my favorite one is the first one we're going to talk about is literature circles. Has anyone ever heard of literature circle? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. There are different ways that you can use literature circles. I'm going to describe one way that we're going to use them, or that you can use a literature circle. So a literature circle gives the opportunity for students to talk among their peers about a book. Through these, students build community, speaking and listening skills, and deepening their understanding of the book. I find these very, very important to use in the upcoming school year in the library or even in your classroom, especially after COVID, when students were isolated and were stuck at home. They didn't get to really interact and talk among their peers because they were isolated and not with their friends or peers or classmates. So I feel like this is very important that we need to integrate in our classrooms in the next few years to catch up on those conversations that they lacked for the year that we missed out on. So depending on how many students are in each group, here are some different roles the students can have in a literature circle. So I'm going to describe these 6 or 7 ways. It does not matter how many students you have in literature circles. You can decide if you want to use 2, you can use 3, 4, or you can do groups of 6 or 7 that uses all of these roles. So I've broken these roles down on each slide. I'm going to give a brief description on what roles that you could give each student. So one role would be an artistic artist. During that role, while you're reading a story, a passage, a chapter of a book, or just a short summary of it, you could be this role would be thinking during the story about which part you would want to illustrate. Okay, so basically they would be the illustrator of this story. So that's the first role that you could be in a literature circle. And the second one would be a creative connector. Be thinking of connections you've made within the story. This could be with things that relate to you, relating to your background knowledge, or this could be connections with things that you've read from other books or things that you've heard of, you've watched on TV, songs, or something that you've listened in the classroom. So during the same summary or chapter or book, you can make connections just like the illustrator was going to illustrate their drawing. So in this role, they're making connections. The third one is a discussion director. They find a good stopping point before something is about to happen or after, and let the passage predictor make their predictions. So they're just kind of in charge of when they're going to stop the story to talk among their peers about what's about to happen or what already happened. The next role would be a passage predictor. As you read, pay close attention to the plot and character development. So this is kind of going off of the past role. You're gonna you can hear my baby in the background crying. You're gonna pay close attention to what's going on, the climax of the story, the plot, what's about to happen, what do you think is going to happen at the end, why do you think a certain scenario happened at the beginning of the story, what do you think about these characters. So this is all about making predictions. The next one would be a word wizard. It's another role that you give a student. As you read, be on the lookout for words that stand out to you. They can be words you've never seen before, sound funny, or words that give great description, okay? So basically, your role would be to just jot down words that you find that you would go over with your group while you're reading your summary chapter or book. And then the last row would be super summarizer. And so as you read, pay close attention to what is going on so you can retell the story or part at the end. So basically, after all the other rows have shared or presented their topics, the super summarizer would summarize all of them all together. And so here we're going to go back to our Google form. And this one is, which role would you enjoy most in a literature circle? So we're gonna pretend that you are in a literature circle. Which role would you want to choose? And you could let your students choose which role they would want, or you could assign them. Personally, I would assign them so they wouldn't argue or have any kind of conflict over who was doing which role. So these literature circles really can help students get really engaged in books. You can select the book for them. You could give them a selection of books and let them choose which one. It's whatever that you personally find that you think is best. So now, if you want to pause the video and go to the Google form, and you can press play from here on out. And so the next thing we would talk about is book talks. A book talk is to encourage others to read a book. Imagine it being a commercial and you're trying to sell something. So one book that I have always personally loved is The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So if I was wanting students to read that, I would give them a book talk and just give them something that I would inform them or tell them about something that would make them want to read this book talk or read this certain book. You could do book talks about several books that you could put on display in your library, and maybe give a diverse collection to showcase to your students. So you're given a diverse selection, and number two, you're getting them excited to read these certain books. You could pick classics. In our textbook on page 61, it gives us the top 10 books for young adult literature. You could select those 10, showcase them, and give book talks about each one of them and see which ones get chosen. Or you could do them about new literature or whatever you find personally that fits best. So now we're going to go back to our Google form, and I want you to think of your favorite book of all time. Imagine you're giving a book talk. What would you say to someone to encourage them to read it? Okay, so one of the books I've previously read is Where the Crawdads Sing, and a book talk for me would be like, it's this mystery, it's a romance, you have to read to the very last page, it's great. You just talk it up. You're just wanting to sell this story to somebody. And I've actually gave personal book talks because I've got my mother-in-law and sister-in-law all to read this book because I love it, and I've book talked it up. So you can do a book talk for anything that you find that is interesting to you. So you can pause the video here and go to your Google form and then press play from here on out. So now we're going to go to our third strategy that I think is very, very successful is audiobooks and or oral reading. And so here are some benefits of audiobooks and oral reading. One, it increases vocabulary skills. Number two, it improves speaking and writing skills. Number three, it introduces storytelling. And number four, it improves listening skills. I find oral reading is super duper important for you to do at least every day in your classroom and or in the library. You can give a book to a student and they can read, but you're not listening to them read these books. Sometimes I need an example to be standing in front of them reading and listening to fluency and listening to how you pronounce certain words. I teach second grade. I taught second grade last year, and I had a variety of readers. I had kindergarten level all the way to fifth grade, and no matter what story I was reading, oral reading is great for any grade level because they need to listen to how you're supposed to read it and speak, and don't be monotoned and read with enthusiasm, so they can use that when they're reading silently. Also, audiobooks does it for you, so you don't have to do it as a teacher. And audiobooks are becoming more and more popular, so they're easier to access. There's some in the library. There's some online that you can find. On YouTube is a great resource. You can find people reading different stories. And that's another way that you can find how to pronounce certain words. Or, for example, if you're reading reading a book about another culture and you're not sure how to pronounce a word, audiobooks are great. They pronounce it for you, and that's how you say that. Like, I'm not really sure. I wasn't really sure how to pronounce it. Going back to literature circles, those diverse books, those word wizards would be a great role to be, so you could break down and figure out what these funny words or these words with great meaning mean. And so those are my three very big strategies that I would strongly encourage classrooms and libraries to use to increase literacy. we're going to reflect real quick, and I want you to go to your Google form and what is one thing you've learned and may try in your own classroom or library. So I want you to pause and go to your Google form to complete this. And that is all I have for our PD. If you have any questions, please email me, amanda.caudle@kyschools.us. I hope you found this video interesting. I apologize for my baby crying in the middle of it. And yeah, and if you have any strategies that you find interesting that you would want to incorporate in your future library or classroom, please tell me that too so we can share ideas. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.